Hello guys, my name is Sam Dubin and I'm going to be presenting to you guys on agriculture in the Ivory Coast. So let's begin with their economic situation. The land consists of 322,462 square miles, and of that, 20,600 miles are used for agriculture. And around 75% of the land is arable, which basically means that it is usable for agriculture. Their population consists of 23.7 billion people. And up until August 7th, 1960, the country was actually a French colony. So they are primarily French-speaking and have a lot of French influence in society, which I will get back to in a little bit. Now, as for issues related to society, the country is very ethnically diverse, with over 60 different ethnic groups, a lot of that coming from immigration from other African countries and European countries as well. And they are very religiously diverse as well, the majority being 42% Muslim, 34% Christian, and 4% having indigenous beliefs. Now, I said I would get back to the French influence, so here we go. Their French rule ended in 1960 when they gained their independence, and directly following that, the agricultural production increased greatly, and this is because of the establishment of development projects by the French government and the Ivorian government. The most notable being the National Agricultural Service Agency, or ANANDER for short. And this was formed by the merging of 3 different organizations: the Extension Services to Cocoa and Coffee Growers, the Extension Services to Food Crop Growers, and the third being Extension Services to Livestock. And this organization, or ANANDER, basically helped provide aid and advice to farmers on different crops. Now, as for the role of agriculture on the Ivory Coast, around 25% of their gross domestic product is related to agriculture, and 60% of their exports are agricultural products as well. Now, of their large population, 68% of citizens are involved in agriculture, which is a pretty big margin. And something that the Ivory Coast is known for, actually, is being the top African producers of cashews. Some other crops that they produce are coffee, cocoa, rubber, cotton, oil, nuts, and bananas. Now, their agriculture is mainly composed of small farmers producing these large cash crops. As you can probably guess, their economy is heavily dependent on agriculture. This stems basically from an economic boom in the 1960s and early 1970s. And this was because of coffee and cocoa production being very popular. Now, unfortunately, it was followed by an economic downturn in the late 70s to early 80s because of instability of cocoa and coffee prices and because of the debt gained in the world recession. Their solution for this problem was to create the Caisse de stabilisation et de soutien des prix et des producteurs agricoles, or CSSPA for short. Their intention was to stabilize and support the prices of agricultural prices, and they had good intentions but poor results. So the intentions were to give the market a fixed price on these products. However, it did not work as planned because the high prices that were fixed resulted in lower demand for those products and eventually led to lower incomes from small farmers. Now, as for their livestock production, the Ivory Coast is mainly producing poultry, beef, sheep, goats, and pigs. And unfortunately, their beef production only meets around 40% of the country's needs. The reason why livestock production is not as successful as crop production is because there are a lot of high costs associated with raising livestock. There are limited veterinary services available to producers, and there's a low productivity of domestic and native breeds of livestock. The other problems include low incomes and low yields from farmers. Now, another thing that the Ivory Coast is known for is their fishing, and they are home to Abidjan, the second largest tuna port in the Atlantic. And there are also artisanal fishermen who target small pelagic fish and sardines, and these fish are either served fresh or smoked. Now, as for the recent progress and setbacks, the biggest problem for the Ivory Coast today is deforestation, and this is due to the high demands for coffee and cocoa. Now, in 1960, 12 million hectares of land were covered by forests, and in 2007, only 2.8 million of that remained. So there was a loss of over 50% of forests in less than 50 years, which is very detrimental to the ecosystem and can definitely lead to further problems. As to barriers to further progress, the Ivory Coast must learn to decrease their economic dependence on agriculture. This could happen by increasing value-added industries such as food and oil processing plants. Along with that, their banking systems must be improved as well. And this can happen by increasing the availability of small loans to personal bankings and large businesses as well for larger loans. In order to do this, the Ivory Coast must educate their people on banking and credit. And lastly, another thing they could do is improve their education system. 95% of their budget actually goes towards teachers' salaries, which means that only 5% goes towards textbooks and actual learning environments for students, which is shocking. And another shocking fact is that the literacy rate of the country is only 40%, which means that the country must educate their citizens in order to help further progress.